Hello, and welcome to Earthworms, bringing you green views we always hope you can use. We are KDHX, independent media in St. Louis. I'm Jean Ponzi, the host of these environmental conversations since 1988. And tonight, it is my great pleasure to host this special event for KDHX donors and supporters, and to welcome to it my longtime friend, Eric von Schrader, who is the author of a new book, a new novel, called A Universe Less Traveled, which is very much about St. Louis. And then also, is it really about St. Louis? You'll have to find out. Want to let you know that this edition of Earthworms is brought to you by Forest Keeling Nursery, representing over 7 decades of research and commitment to grow superior plants that are also better for the environment. Forest Keeling provides native plants that survive and thrive in our region, retaining soil and nurturing wildlife with their fruit, nectar, and cover. Learn more about Forest Keeling Nursery at fknursery.com. We have a special guest for this edition of Earthworms Live. Oh, and by the way, I want to mention, if you have questions throughout this program, please use the chat function to type them in, and we'll get them in there as well as we can in the course of this hour-long edition of Earthworms. Special guest comes to us from a sister media organization, longtime columnist and purveyor of, I would say, insightful and rye and sometimes whole wheat opinions from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Bill McClellan. Welcome to KDHX and Earthworms, and thanks for giving a special welcome to Eric von Schrader. Bill?
Well, thank you very much, Jean. And it's easy to give a special welcome to Eric. Like you, I've known him for a while, and I really enjoyed this book. And, you know, I've written a column for the Post-Dispatch for many, many years, and I only had one crusade in all that time, and that was for men to wear shorts in the summer. And that's part of Eric's book, Men Are Wearing Shorts. And another thing that I advised was there would be a big summer solstice celebration to celebrate the wearing of shorts, and it would be at Cahokia Mounds. And Cahokia Mounds is another big part of Eric's book. And in fact, I should mention, before we turn it over to Eric, that scene behind him is Cahokia Mounds. I mean, when we first came on tonight, I thought he's living outside Napa Valley or something, and that's from the backyard. But it isn't. That's Cahokia Mounds. And Eric, you've written a very fun book to read, and I've enjoyed it.
Well, okay. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Jean. Well, I hope it's a fun book to read. That was my intent. I've made kind of a fantasy adventure story that's all set in St. Louis that goes a lot of different ways and has a lot of different elements in it. And it's trying to be entertaining and a little bit intriguing and thought-provoking, but mostly an entertaining story with characters people might recognize who are St. Louisans, might recognize some of the people and organizations and places that I, to some degree, make fun of. But that's what I was trying to do. So I hope it's an enjoyable book for everybody, and I believe it is. That's the feedback I'm getting. Bill was really important. A real inspiration to me through this book. As he mentioned, I did steal one of his ideas about men wearing shorts with their suits in the summer. And in my alternate universe version of St. Louis, that's what they do. But also, Bill's columns have always been so multi-layered about families through the generations in St. Louis and how an immigrant 100 years ago did something and their children did something and the grandchildren did something else. And also his sort of very wry humor and look at puncturing a little bit some of the big shots and the powerful people. And that whole spirit, though a lot of it maybe not appear obviously in St. Louis in my book like the shorts do, but it was certainly a sensibility that I had in my mind as I was concocting this story. So thank you, Bill. And I'm so pleased to have you here tonight.
So Eric, Earthworms being an environmental program, there is a direct connection to your book, A Universe Less Traveled, because there are a lot of really good green things, really exciting ideas and futuristic ideas and sensible ideas. And in fact, one big one has actually materialized since you finished the book. We'll get to that. Let's just let people hang on that for a little bit. But we, you know, it's not a utopia. Everything is not perfect there, but
Right.
thank you so much for crafting a story that is not another flippant dystopia. We don't need that. We can really use some encouragement. And as you were working on this book, over the hunk of time that it took you to literally dream it up and then write it and refine it and produce it, how do you feel about, what does it mean to you to have put out a hopeful and a creative and a cooperative vision?
Well, I guess it means a lot. I'm pretty proud of it. Yes, as you mentioned, my book is, if it fits the genre in today's book market, and I don't know if it does, it's a fantasy book. And it's a parallel universe story. It's about a parallel universe version of St. Louis that my hero, a guy named Billy Bustani, stumbles into and starts looking around and meeting people, and things start happening. But so many of that novels of that type have one of two things: either a dystopia, as you mentioned, there's been some horrible apocalypse and it's Mad Max and that kind of stuff, or it may be some sort of ultra insanely high-tech paradise. Well, both of those are kind of, to my mind, a little bit overdone. So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make an alternate version of my hometown and the city I love, St. Louis, into as a different version of it that was very recognizable, and maybe just in a lot of ways just a little bit different, in other ways a lot different. And I did that and the reader discovers that in bits and pieces throughout the story, along with Billy. And what I did was I invented a different 20th century for St. Louis than the one we've all lived through, from 1900 up till, more or less the present day. I made a different story for the city. Things happened differently starting about then. It was the same city up till around 1900 or so, and then the two cities went different directions. And I had a lot of fun with that. And there's chapters in the book that are kind of flashing back to earlier decades, which sort of, through the story of another character, sort of fills in how this other St. Louis got to be so different. And it's really different in some ways because it's a major world metropolis. It's loaded with people. They don't know what to do. Their biggest problem is they don't know what to do with all the people who want to come there. And it's got global industries and things like that. Some of it's kind of silly, and I kind of did that on purpose. But also, so in that sense, it's a hopeful version of St. Louis, and they have a bunch of green technology, which I highlighted. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted to make something that would sort of make people think a little outside the box and feel good and have sort of go on a roller coaster ride of a adventure while they're doing that. And that was sort of my goal for this book. And it took me about 5 years to write it. I had a bunch of interruptions and other stuff was going on in my life, but it was about 5 years from when I started it to when I finished it. But it's a labor of love for sure.
It's a love story for your and from your hometown. I'm going to ask you to read a little hunk from A Universe Less Traveled in a couple of minutes, Eric von Schrader. But your main character, your hero, Billy Bustani, he comes from a family that has very distinctive media connections. And
Yes.
You have had very distinctive media connections, including, not limited to, having been a leader of Double Helix Community Media through the years when the organization was trying to get a radio station leading up to KDHX. You might have been the president of the board of Double Helix on that fateful night in 1987 when KDHX first went on the air. You're in the photo at the transmitter shack.
Yeah.
From that. Yeah.
I was there. Yeah.
We have
out of the
photographic
transmitter shack, I was one of the 10 or 12 people who was there. and
So,
very excited because it had been years of struggle to get to that point.
so you're, and not only that, I mean, you've written training programs, you've produced videos, you've worked in media a lot in many different ways throughout your career as media continues to evolve. Um, and here you are writing a book. You know, you didn't, you're not doing a blog, you're not doing a podcast, you did one of those old-fashioned things. What place does this kind of story, do you think, still have, continue to have in our lives and in our society?
Well,
And delivering it.
why did I write a book? I guess I wrote a book because it was something I could do all by myself. And I had always wanted to do it actually, and had never always thought, well, I'm not my idea. I'm not smart enough. My ideas aren't good enough. And then I got started on this. And once I found the classic thing that people talk about, that the story starts to come alive inside me. I'd be out riding my bike and I could hear the characters talking to, saying things. I could hear scenes kind of unfolding. And that went on off and on for the last few years as I was putting it together. So I kind of really enjoyed the process. I've done a lot of writing, mostly very functional nonfiction, make it clear, training courses and things like that. But that did prepare me a little bit because I've learned to really write clear sentences. But this was a change. And I'm kind of happy with the way it came out, and it was a wonderful experience to do it. And I hope it's going to be a wonderful experience for everyone who reads it.
And your hero also draws some of the drama and the trauma and the motivation in his life from his father,
Yeah.
who is a kind of, you know, a major goofy TV commercial figure, advertising guy. Talk about that archetype and that character.
Yeah. So Billy Bustani is my main character, and he has this local chain of like computer and TV electronic stores, and his story takes place in the year 2010, 10 years ago, and he's run this business since the late 80s when his father died unexpectedly, and he was like a kid right out of college, and he took it over, and he did really well for a while. But now that it's getting into 2010, online businesses like Amazon are eating him alive, and he's realizing he can't compete, and there's no way this thing, which is sort of a legacy from his father. Well, his father was a guy who built this business up from nothing on the strength of making these sort of goofball, wacky, stupid TV commercials, and he became a celebrity in St. Louis as one of those guys you'd see on late night TV. And I had a lot of fun with this character, and people who were in St. Louis, 70s, 80s, 90s, will quickly recognize the person I modeled the TV ads of my character on. It was a guy, and I'll name Steve Mizrarini. I'm sure many of the people listening now have went, oh yeah, they remember Steve Mizrarini. Well, I kind of had fun with my main character. That was his father, was this guy who's gone now, and who actually he had a very difficult relationship with. But Steve Mizrarini had built the son is still living under the shadow of the reputation that his father had built. People still 30 years later are talking to him about, oh, I remember your dad, that kind of stuff. And he kind of doesn't like it very much, but it is. And I wrote some scenes of the father doing some commercials, and they were really fun because I was always a fan of that stuff. I thought Steve Mizrarini was one of many who did that, but he was tremendously original and creative, and it was kind of folk art what he did. It was sort of no one gave him permission; he just went and did it, and I love that. And so that's it. However, I must say, in defense of Steve Mizrarini, I know nothing about him as a person, and my character is not a super nice guy to his family, but that's something I made up completely. What I loved about Steve Mizrarini and what inspired me was the wonderful creativity of the TV commercials he did. And it relates a little bit to KDHX because I think KDHX is a place where people who are a little offbeat, out of the mainstream, have been able to find a place to have a voice and show off who they are. and entertain people and educate people and promote the arts, and but in kind of an outsider grassroots kind of way that I think is really wonderful. And I'm very proud that KDHX has done that and managed to do it for 33 years, I think is the number now.
No, it's longer than that. I
Okay,
think it's
longer than that.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
a
maybe
long
it is.
time.
33, 34. It's a lot.
Yeah, close
It's
enough.
longer than that. Yeah.
Who's counting?
We are. Every time we get to a milestone, and that's good reason for fundraising. By the way, thank you if you're tuned in. This is a special edition of Earthworms, the environmental conversation show on KDHX, normally an audio podcast that you can listen to at your convenience. And tonight, a special feature of our, in the vein of our Listen Live program series. Thank you if you are a supporter of KDHX and therefore are tuned in to this event. Thank you for your generous support. Eric, I think, and my guest, Eric von Schrader, the author of a brand new book, A Universe Less Traveled. Got to hold it up right in the middle of the screen.
A little higher.
Well, if I hold it up a little higher, if I hold it up a little higher, it's going to disappear. There you go.
There you go. That's it.
There you go.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to ask you to read a little bit about it, and then we'll talk some more about the vision that you have and some of the characters and some of the ways that this story came to you and I think are really exciting elements.
Sure. Okay. So as I said, my protagonist, this guy, Billy Bustani, who's he was one day in the summer of 2010, he was having a particularly horrible day. It really brought home to him how his business was like dying and he didn't know what to do about it. So he goes down to where he used to live, which was in South St. Louis. He lives out in West County at this point, in a nice house because he has a nice business. And he goes down to where he used to live and is looking around and decides to go to the place he loved to get pizza in the 80s, 70s and 80s, which is at the corner of Grand and Gravois. And many of you may know that corner. And he goes there and finds out that the pizza place long gone. And he's just looking around at that. If you remember, people know there's a big tall building there called the Southside National Bank building, like a 10-story tall sort of limestone 1920s building that's totally out of place in that area, but there it is. And he sort of stumbles into a weird experience and he ends up in this market that's this very exotic market with people and all kinds of people and doing all kinds of things in this sort of indoor food market. And he's like amazed because he'd never heard of it before. And then he comes out and he's sort of feeling great. And then he looks back and there's no building there. It's a vacant lot. And so he's totally mystified. He doesn't know what's going on. He's going, am I crazy? What is this? So he's sort of stewing over that for the next week or two. He tries to do it one more time. He goes back there and nothing happens. He tries to make it happen again. He's trying to figure out, what did I do? How did I get there? So the passage I'm going to read is the third time he goes back. And this is the time where it starts to work for him.
Eric von Schrader from A Universe Less Traveled.
Bear with me. Billy slipped away from work the next Tuesday afternoon, swearing to himself that this would be his last visit to Grand and Gravois. He slowly paced back and forth in front of the Southside National Bank building. He watched the cars in the White Castle drive-thru across the street. Standing in the alcove, he spun around in quick half circles like he had done the week before. Nothing. He tried rewinding his mental movie back to the moment when he felt the little shudder of cold air that perhaps signaled the change. Nothing happened. He leaned against the building and tilted his head up to see the beaks of the carved eagles on the walls above, protruding from the surface of the limestone. They looked weird from this angle. He thought back to the Carlos Castaneda books that he had read in high school up on the third floor of Flora Place, his childhood home. What would Don Juan tell him to do? Billy closed his eyes and tried to empty his mind. He sensed a slight movement in the darkness behind his eyelids, something hovering off in a corner, just out of range. It seemed like he should know what it was, but he couldn't quite pin it down. And then he felt an unpleasant twinge of vertigo and a throbbing in his ears. He opened his eyes and moved his head, but it got worse. He hunched over and squatted down. Good thing no one was around. He didn't move his head, fearing that the vertigo would overwhelm him. He stared at the sidewalk and noticed bits of gravel embedded in the concrete, like the peaks of a mountain range emerging from the clouds. He took a long, deep breath and tried to relax. Everything slowed down. His ears continued to throb, muffling the sounds of the street. He took another breath. The whoosh of the inhale was all that he could hear. The vertigo began to recede, and just as he thought he could try to stand up again, he was bumped from behind and pushed into the side of the building. He shot up and shouted indignantly, "Hey, watch it!" "Sorry, pal. I didn't see you down there." Billy turned to see a fat man in a blue jumpsuit pushing a large cart piled high with boxes of fruits and vegetables. "This thing's tricky to maneuver when it's loaded. My mistake." "No problem," Billy said. The man pushed a button on the handle of the cart, and with the whir of a motor, it rose up and pivoted on its wheels. He guided it down the sidewalk towards the Asian market, just a few feet to the west. Billy grinned. He had done it. He turned around and looked out at the street corner. Pardon me here. The time before, he hadn't paid any attention to anything but the market. Instead of the white castle across the street, a building of green glass filled the corner. A billboard on the roof had a huge image of a beautiful woman in a flowing gown. It was animated, almost 3D. She appeared to be floating. The folds of the gown fluttered in slow motion. Billy thought she was smiling at him. Lettering faded in. Reifenschneider's fall fashions just for her. On the far corner, he saw an ornate brick structure, 6 stories tall, with wide windows punctuating the facade. A subtle vine-like pattern of light and shadow in the brickwork swirled up the building, framing the windows. The roof line was sheathed by a shaggy fringe of actual shrubs and vines. Broad shade trees lined both Grand and Gravois. A blue double-decker streetcar whooshed by silently. A knot of people waited across the street, purposeful men and women carrying briefcases, children holding hands with their mothers. And when the light turned green, they flowed around Billy, paying no attention to him. Billy drank it all in. He couldn't make any sense out of what was seeing. Where the hell am I? He wondered. He blinked his eyes a few times to make sure he was not imagining or hallucinating this scene. Everything looked real. As he recalled it later, odd little details stuck with him. Many people were wearing bright red shoes. A man in a business suit sped by on a motorized scooter that weaved deftly around cars and pedestrians. It had a slender, scimitar-shaped frame, a larger wheel in front and a smaller one behind. There were fewer cars than more 1- and 2-wheeled scooters shot by, ridden by both men in shorts, that's for Bill, and women whose dresses trailed behind them. There were fewer cars than he would have expected. They were rounded, almost egg-shaped, with front wheels splayed out from the body like spider legs. Some had 3 wheels rather than 4. He noticed one with a raised compartment in the rear and with the driver up high while other people sat in the front seats. Maybe it was a taxi. Excuse me a second here. Okay. He looked east on Gravois. In his world, it was a 6-lane street with auto parts stores, fast food joints, and nail salons scattered between parking lots. But now he saw an elegant boulevard flanked by wide tree-shaded sidewalks. A streetcar line with more smooth blue cars ran down the middle. 3- and 4-story buildings lined both sides of the street. Some were older brick structures, others were newer with glass walls and ribbons of balconies. Many had small trees and shrubs on their roof, and greenery hung from the balconies. Billy strolled east. As he walked under one of the wide awnings that extended from every building, he heard a whirring sound. Looked up and saw the awning extend itself for a foot or two. No one was attending to it, so it was apparently automated, adjusting to the changing angle of the sun. There were more people on the sidewalk than he would have expected on a Tuesday afternoon. Men and women going in and out of shops, walking dogs, or sitting at sidewalk tables, chatting and reading newspapers. A boy of about 7 was eating ice cream at a sidewalk table as his mother was talking with her friend. As Billy walked by the table, the boy stared at him. Billy smiled and nodded. The boy kept staring with his mouth open and ice cream dribbling down his chin. The mother and friend glanced up and both gave Billy a hard look. He continued on, a little shaken. What was that all about? He looked around, and then it hit him. The men all wore shorts, some with matching socks and ties, others with billowy loose shirts. Most wore hats, none wore sunglasses. And Billy, in his normal summer outfit of a polo shirt, khaki pants, and running shoes, was very out of place. He took off his sunglasses and put them in his pocket. He was not used to being thought of as weird looking. So that's Billy's first
Okay.
really look.
So some of the green things, Eric von Schrader, I got to ask you to let's talk a little bit more about the.
Sure.
Okay. First, Billy, he gives this alternative universe a media-related name. Tell us
Yes.
about that and how'd you get to that? What's the
Okay.
origin of that?
Well, what comes after this and what sort of drives the rest of the story is Billy learns how to do this. And he learns that he can kind of go there and come back whenever he wants. And it becomes his escape, his little personal secret that he's escaping from his sort of depressing life, depressing business life. He has a very nice family, but this is his little secret that he's going off and going into this alternate universe and meeting people and looking around and doing stuff. And he does this for months. And he's always wondering, like, what's really going on here? I wish this sure seems real. I don't think I'm crazy, but I better not tell anybody because they might think I'm crazy. So, yes, because he has a television store, he sells a lot of TVs. And this is around 2010 when they were just moving from standard definition TVs to high definition TVs. And that was a transition that was happening in his business. And so his shorthand that he invented for this was his regular St. Louis was standard definition or SD St. Louis. And this new, more vivid, more incredible St. Louis was high def HD St. Louis. So that's what he calls it.
So in HD St. Louis, you've got plants growing up the side of the buildings, in addition to the plant motif ornamentation on the building. You've got silent street cars going by. You've got street trees at an intersection, Grand and Gravois, which, KDHX fans will remember that was not very far from where we used to be on Magnolia. And that's a big diagonal intersection in St. Louis. And it's pretty much a concrete jungle out there. People on scooters, not so unusual. And a lot of people on the streets, especially in the summer. In a normal St. Louis summer, you would not see that many people on the streets. So
Right.
Say a little bit more about the green stuff, but don't go to the building material yet. Okay, let's say that.
Okay,
for a
we'll
separate
say
question.
that.
Say that.
So part of what I wanted to do was sort of make up the St. Louis, fantasize about a St. Louis I wish existed, sort of all my fun dreams and fantasies about it. So I was trying to play with that concept. So I thought one of the things that have always bothered me about St. Louis, probably a lot of other cities in US where it's hot in the summer, is that everybody stays inside, huddles in their air conditioning. They're air conditioned, they stay inside, they're watching the ball game or whatever, making with their friends, and they hop in their air conditioned car and they go to some air conditioned, not this year, but go to an air conditioned place where they work or a mall or something like that. And I've always liked cities when people are out mingling with other people and out in their street life, and people are they're outside strolling around in the evening, and interacting with all kinds of different people. And what I've invented was a very sort of diverse city. So I've always liked that. So I wanted to make that to be a hallmark of this city. And so I actually have a little bit more. And again, I have the luxury of don't have to be realistic. This is a fantasy novel, right? So I
Mhm.
can do what I want. But I had the luxury of thinking about that. But I wanted it to be where I made a lot of hints that they have these sort of outdoor. They design their buildings so yeah, awnings come over the sidewalk to keep them shaded, and it's all automated based on where the sun is. They have these sort of cooling towers that are on key intersections that somehow blow cold air, cooler air out so people can be outside. The green roofs, and as you know, green roofs and real greenery on your building helps cut down the urban heat island effect and
Yep.
keep it cooler. And I also talk about how some of the buildings, the houses were such that the walls actually retract, kind of like a dollhouse
Mm.
when there's a breeze out, so you can feed the breeze through your house or even up through a high-rise building. They're not designed to be enclosed and mechanically cooled. So that was an idea that I've seen a little bit. I did a little bit of research on it, and I thought, well, this is really fun. And again, it's a fantasy. I can put it in if I wanted. So I did, and I think it contributes to this idea of a city where people come together and do things and do stuff, and there are outdoor parties and events and sidewalk cafes everywhere and that kind of stuff. So that's what I was
Well,
doing.
and you did that really well. And some of that stuff, I mean, green roofs, vegetative roofs, planting trees, counteracting heat island effect, cities blocking off streets so that restaurants can now have more sidewalk cafe action in the
Right.
age of COVID so that they can continue to be in business and people can enjoy that hospitality and that getting out and interacting and do it safely. These are some very practical, very simple, civilized ideas. Later in the book, I forget what the name of it is. It kind of reminded me of the High Line in New York. There's a place
Yeah.
in downtown HD. Would you talk about that a little?
Sure. Yeah, I called it the mezz, which stands for the mezzanine. So in this world where downtown St. Louis is like booming with high rises everywhere, and it's like it's a huge mecca. But one of the things they did was between all the streets of downtown, they designed the buildings so about 5 stories up, there's this sort of upper level park that, and then walkways and bridges that connect all the different blocks. So you can go up there and there's actual parks up there, or there's handball courts, or there's outdoor, there's ice cream stands and trees and formal gardens. But you can walk, all the way from one end of downtown to the other without ever going down to the street, kind of like they have for wintertime in Minneapolis. That was one of my ideas
Mm.
for that. But I made it a summertime kind of outdoor place in St. Louis. And Billy goes up there and meets some, has some interesting experiences up there. Let's put it that way. I did the same thing, if you recall, Gene, you've read the book, with the Eads Bridge. I made the Eads Bridge a pedestrian place that people want to go on weekends and stroll up and down, and there's parks and people out doing stuff and kite flying clubs. And the Eads Bridge, the upper level of the Eads Bridge, instead of sort of a pretty desolate place where cars go by every now and then to get over to East St. Louis, it's this real feature. And that's another thing that I fantasized about, and that's definitely remind was from the High Line in New York. Was my idea, was my inspiration for that.
So technology that you have imagined has to do with a very famous building material, St. Louis centric building material.
Yeah.
Give us that part of the story, Eric von
Okay.
Schrader.
All right. Well, one of the things that made me, if anybody who's from St. Louis knows, particularly the older parts of the city, is like heavily brick construct. Everything's built out of brick, and there's some really gorgeous homes and buildings that are brick, and back around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, amazing things were done, and the craftsmanship was out of this world. And other cities don't have that. You go to Chicago and it's like, frame. But the brick in St. Louis has always fascinated me, as it's so beautiful. I do want to shout out to a guy who's a filmmaker in St. Louis named Bill Streeter, who made this really wonderful documentary about bricks in St. Louis called Brick by Chance and Fortune. That's available. You can watch it on Amazon. It's really fun. It was on KDHX 7-8 years ago. That's when I saw it. So brick is an important thing. So what I did was I made in my fantasy version of the 20th century that St. Louis brick technology and the culture of bricks and the designing with bricks becomes the biggest thing in the city, and in fact dominates architecture and construction around the world. Everyone in the world knows about St. Louis bricks, and the biggest company in St. Louis is a brick company. And I use the name of a 19th century company that's not really there anymore called the Hydraulic Brick Company. And in my St. Louis, it's everything. And they've got an 80-story building in downtown St. Louis. And they play a pretty important part in the story, this organization. And I had a lot of fun with that. But the thing I had the most fun with is I invented what I thought was something totally absurd and silly about what could they be doing with bricks besides just building stuff. So one of the things they did in my story is back in the 1940s, they invent a way of generating electricity with bricks. So buildings could generate their own electricity by like the expansion and thermal heating and cooling of the brick over the course of the day. And that revolutionizes the world. They're making these bricks, and they're specially however they did it. They're all over the world. The whole world is powered by these kind of bricks. And I thought, well, what a riot. I mean, that's the most far-fetched thing I could possibly think of. Bricks generate electricity from bricks. I don't know.
Yeah,
it seemed like a fun
right.
St. Louis thing, but also pretty silly. Then, and Bill, I don't know if you noticed this, about a month ago, there was an announcement by Washington University of research they were doing about using bricks to store electricity, kind of like batteries, and saying that could be a way of powering buildings from bricks. Jean, you were the first person who alerted me to this story when it came out. And I was drinking coffee at breakfast, and I about fell out of my chair. I said, wait a minute, this is the craziest thing I've ever thought of. And apparently something kind of like it is being done in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was hilarious. My website, which I would encourage people to go see, ericvonschrader.com. Maybe you can link to it. Yes. I have a couple things. One, I have lots of photos. I went around last year in St. Louis and took photos of pretty much every place where things happen in the story. And then I also have a tab called Inspirations, and I have some clips from Steve Mizrarini. And I talk about bricks and the history of bricks. And I do have that link to that WashU press release about the bricks research that they're doing to generate or to store, use bricks as batteries. So it's pretty funny.
Funny, but yeah.
Well, you get lucky now and then,
Well, and you've gotten lucky a couple of times here. I think you're doing a good job. We're talking this is an Earthworms Live special event from KDHX Independent Media in St. Louis. I'm Jean Ponzi, and my special guest is Eric von Schrader, a longtime friend and supporter of KDHX and our parent organization, Double Helix Community Media, and the author of a new book that I highly recommend. It's an excellent read. A Universe Less Traveled. I have to hold it up carefully so it doesn't disappear in the whatever the name of the building is behind me that Superman was said to have leapt in a single bound.
The Continental Building.
Thank you very much. By the way, Left Bank Books will be hosting an event with Eric, and I get to be his conversation partner on Thursday of this week on September 10th. And A Universe Less Traveled officially comes out on September 10th. Left Bank Books.
Day after tomorrow, not very far.
Great source for getting your copy of A Universe Less Traveled. Support KDHX, Independent Media, and Left Bank, your local independent bookstore.
Yes, and you can order it on their website. You can order it right now, or you can call them. I guess in the daytime, call their phone number, Left Bank Books phone number, and they can take your order over the phone and get you the book.
Yep,
they've got them.
They manage it safely. You place your order and you come by and you pick it up in a basket outside the door.
So or they can send it. They can also send it right to your house.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So Eric, another sort of sustainability related element of your book, in the real world of environmentalism, corporations and business people are often the bad guys, are the source of problems. And you have a character in A Universe Less Traveled that comes from that time-honored tradition of being a bad guy and a hustler, and he winds up being the progenitor of a remarkable idea that really turns the key over that century that you invented for HD St. Louis. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do in the story is that, I paint this picture of this amazing St. Louis with millions of people and people crowding in and imagine tour groups with little flags from, China and Russia and Argentina walking around because everybody wants to see St. Louis. Everybody wants to be part of it. They come from all over the world. Well, how did it get to be that way? Okay, I mean, it's easy to make it up, but then it's like, well, could I do anything that sort of showed a path, implausible as it might be, to show how that St. Louis turned out so differently than the St. Louis we all know? Mm-hmm. So I have these flashback chapters that follow another character who is a guy who is, as you said, kind of he's sort of an Elon Musk kind of financial genius kind of guy, but he's a scoundrel. He's totally unscrupulous. And all his main goal is to make a lot of money and be idolized by everybody. That's all he cares about. So, and he becomes kind of a big shot in the early 1930s in St. Louis. I won't tell in the news other St. Louis. I won't tell you how that begins. You can read that in the book. That's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
But St. Louis is in a crisis at one point. Much worse than any crisis we're facing in the real St. Louis today. I mean, existential crisis. Would the city survive? And so he comes up with a plan, and he has to convince all of the conservative bankers and industrialists who Bill knows about people like that who, can't think beyond their nose and and are totally terrified of anything new. But they're terrified because the city's about to fall apart. And so he comes up with this idea where he says, we're gonna raise all the money we need to rebuild the city right here. And he say, well, how are we gonna do that? We don't have enough money. He said, all the average people do. What are you talking about? They don't have any money. He said, yeah, but there are a lot of them, and they're all leaving, and we don't want them to leave. So we'll make it worth their while to stay. So he comes up with this scheme where everyone who lives in the city gets a share, gets some free shares, and then can buy into the program. And only people who live there, if you move away, you got to sell your shares. Only people and if you move to St. Louis, you can buy shares. And he raises money that way, where the people of the citizens of the city actually own the city and own a stake in the businesses there. And it's a monstrous success for him. And it fuels this explosive growth through the 1930s and 40s, which leads to the city that my other character, Billy Bustani, discovers in 2010. And I kind of had a lot of fun inventing that. But that was the scheme. Let everybody in, include everybody. Everybody wants to get in on the act. Give them a shot. Give them a stake. So that's what I did. And there's some good chapters. He's a good character, and some fun stuff happens, and I think it works well, and I think readers will enjoy it. Bill, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Bill McClellan, hang on a second. I'm gonna get you back in here. Bill McClellan, our special guest from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. introduced our mutual friend, Eric von Schrader, and there you go.
Sure. Oh, I saw so many things in your book, Eric, that people have like daydreamed about. Like, in your book, East St. Louis is a thriving place. And I can never pronounce it, gondolas going across the river. And I can remember a few years ago when somebody came up with an idea like that, and people like me ridiculed it, I'm afraid. And as I read your book, I saw these things and I thought, people have dreamed about this, and not the bricks with the electricity, but other ideas you have. And I love the street fairs where people would be singing songs, and like right by Tower Grove Park. I just thought something like that ought to be possible. It probably isn't, but reading your book makes somebody like me think, gosh, the possibilities. So
yeah. Okay. That was my goal, Bill. That's what I was going for, is that things don't have to be the way they are. You never know what could happen, and things could turn out differently. And you mentioned the scene. Yeah. One of the scenes that's one of my favorite in the book is where there's this massive street party near Tower Grove Park on South Grand, where they block the street off, and thousands of people are there eating dinner at these picnic tables up and down in the street. And then there's this pretty amazing band that plays. And Billy goes there. And because someone he's met says, "Yo, you got to come to the party." And it's the greatest night of his life that he spends there. He's like, didn't know what to expect. And it's the most fun that he's had in as long as he can remember. And it sort of like sells him on this, on why he loves this alternate St. Louis. So.
Well, and we have so many festivals. This is a city of festivals and outdoor public events and multicultural music and food and performances. And it's truncated now this year, of course. But normally in St. Louis, you have festivals starting at the end of March, beginning of April, as soon as stuff is thawed out and running until November. And then now you have the winter things that start happening. So the precedent for that culture.
No, you're right. I didn't make that out of thin air, but what I think I tried to do was sort of go up an order of magnitude, and then it becomes something that everybody understands. This is what makes St. Louis wonderful. And I'm not so sure everyone in St. Louis kind of gets that. Yeah, I've been to a lot of great festivals in St. Louis, in Tower Grove Park and the Hill and all over the place, Riverfront. Man, they're huge. They're great. But I don't think the self-image that people have of St. Louis is, we're a city of amazing festivals. Well, I made up a version of it where it is a city of amazing festival, and people come from around the world to come see them, like they go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. People come to St. Louis in my story for the festivals.
Yeah. So Eric von Schrader, behind you in your virtual image on your screen there is an ancient landmark in our region, little known, little appreciated, and the grounds for one of my favorite elements of the book. Would you tell us about Cahokia?
Sure. As people know, and many St. Louis have been there, even though it's not really very large in our collective consciousness, that over about 6 miles from downtown St. Louis, at a place that's now called Cahokia Mountain State Park, was the site of what 1,000 years ago was the largest city in North America, around from about 1000 AD till 1200, 1250. But it's basically forgotten. And the culture that it was part of, the Mississippian culture, which they found which goes all the way from Georgia to Illinois up to Wisconsin and Oklahoma and Ohio, was one big cultural center. Culture of which Cahokia was the largest and the most prominent city there. And it's all kind of disappeared and forgotten. And I've always been a big fan and very interested in ancient American civilizations. I've read a lot about them. I've been to Mexico. I've been to many of the sites in Mexico. And I've always been fascinated about these places that were so strange by our world, but that were all kind of just wiped away and mostly disappeared. Now, people in Mexico would say, well, they weren't totally wiped away, and they're right. So I've always been fascinated by that. And so I did have some people may remember there was an amazing art show at the Art Museum about 2005 called Hero, Hawk, and Open Hand. I've got a link to the book about it on my website. And it was an exhibit of all this Mississippian art from all these places, Cahokia, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, whatever. And you really saw how beautiful it was and how sophisticated it was. And then you realize there was this whole culture that we've forgotten about, that we don't know much about. It was here. So in my story, because the beauty, you asked me why I like to write a novel, I can make up anything. So one of the things that I did was imagined, well, what if Native Americans decided that once again, they wanted to create their own city, a very distinctive, their way, but a modern city their way. And they chose the place to do it, Cahokia. And that's one of the sort of the last part of the book. A lot of it takes place there. But Billy finds his way with his daughter across to this city of Cahokia, and it's he's been amazed by a lot of stuff he's seen in St. Louis, but nothing is as amazing to him as what he finds in Cahokia. And once I thought of this, somehow with this vision, this idea came to me. I don't know how. I couldn't let it go. I said, this is too cool. So I played it out. And again, so Cahokia is kind of in HD, Cahokia is kind of the companion to St. Louis. So that's what it is. And it's all built up, and it's a city of thousands of people with these very distinctive buildings. And the mound that you see behind me is all restored and perfect looking, and that's kind of the centerpiece of this city. So that's as much as I'll say. You can read the book and find out a lot more about it.
You're a good holder back there, Eric von Schrader.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, full disclosure, your novel, A Universe Less Traveled, is the first novel that I have read all the way through, probably in about 5 years.
Okay.
Somehow I've always been a reader, always been a real voracious reader, but somehow over the last, 10 years or so, I got really into reading factual stuff, informative stuff, environmental stuff. Some of it is like, essays and philosophy and a little bit of poetry here and there, but I haven't read a novel for a long time. And I also kind of biased about stuff by guys because so much is by guys. So 2 big points to you, 2 big green stars for you to having read a novel that a factual reader really loved, and you are a guy. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great.
We have about 6 minutes left in this special edition of Earthworms as a special event for KDHX fan club members and our circle of supporters. You dedicate your book, A Universe Less Traveled, Eric, to 2 individuals that I was very pleased and touched to know, Sarah Lindquist and Bob Reuter. And KDHX fans will remember Bob Reuter as the longtime host of Bob's Scratchy Records, one of the all-time stars of KDHX. And then Sarah Lindquist, a dear friend of both of ours. I had to say their names and had to ask you to say a little bit about them and how you were inspired by these 2 creative individuals.
Okay. Well, both of them were friends of mine for many years, and I was inspired by them. Both of them, as I said in the book, for their brilliance and their tenacity. And let me start with Bob. I knew Bob. Actually, I met Bob for the very first time at the predecessor station to KDHX, KDNA. And I was there shooting video of a live music day they were having, and he was one of their performers. And actually, that's on YouTube. If you look up Bob Reuter, KDNA, there's like a little 1-minute clip of him on YouTube in black and white from a long time ago. But it was several years later that we became friends. I really didn't know him at that time. And he educated me so much about music, and he had this sort of totally off the wall sense of humor. And the thing that admired me is that he had this real clear passion and vision for the kind of music he wanted to do. And for most of his life, he got very little recognition or reinforcement. He spent his life broke and playing little bars in South St. Louis, and could and for many years it didn't come together for him, but he never quit. He kept doing it. He also became a great photographer. Many people have seen his photos. And what he did on KDHX with Bob Scratchy Records was like the Sistine Chapel of radio, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in terms of the incredible originality and artistry. So Bob was a guy who never gave up. And only, in the last few years of his life, was he finally starting to really get noticed. First in St. Louis and even outside of St. Louis, and by a lot of younger musicians. And then very sadly, he had that tragic accident in 2013 and he died young. So that was Bob. Sarah, who actually also met for the first time at KDNA, was one of my best friends for many, many years. And she is a muralist. She and her husband, Robert Fishbone, did on the wall productions, did a lot of murals around town. People may remember the Lindy Square mural. It was one of the most famous downtown. And she was always so creative and positive and up for anything and loved kicking ideas around. And she could really paint, which I can't do anything like that. And she was just such a delight to be around and so inspiring, and so inspired me and was very encouraging to me. And my regret about this book is that she's not around. She also died of cancer about 10 years ago. And one of my regrets is that she would have loved it. And I really wish I had done it when she were alive. So that's
had to give a shout out. Had to have a little say their names there.
Thank you.
Sarah Lindquist and Bob Reuter. So Bill McClellan, we have just a couple minutes. Got a closing thought or closing question for our friend Eric von Schrader?
No, I mean, there's so much in his book that could have been real, it seems like. You know, we just had this thing, Eric, Better Together, where there's a big scheme or plan, whatever, to bring everything together. And I thought about that with your citizen shareholder plan. You know, I mean, it's just these sort of off the wall things. Your book is really a treat to read. And Gene, it's fun to be here with you.
Well, I'm proud to have you here. And Bill, who wrote, just so people know, there's a quote from Bill McClellan on the back cover right here that has stood me in good stead and got me noticed by some people because they said, "Oh, Bill McClellan likes this." So, and Bill's quote really nails what the book is all about. And he, as you would expect from a guy like Bill, he boiled it all down into a few sentences, and it's great. So thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure.
Bill McClellan, columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Thanks for joining us tonight on this Earthworms Live edition.
It was fun, Gene. Thank you.
Good to see you. Also want to point out that KDHX programmer Steve Pick has a comment on the back of the book out of the many reviews that are being posted about this.
Yeah, he's right below Bill McClellan and Steve Pick, who is wrote a really short but again perfect little squib. And Steve Pick is not a close friend, but someone I've known for the years, and I knew he was a big reader. And I thought, hey, I'll see what Steve Pick thinks of this. And fortunately, he enjoyed it.
Eric von Schrader, your new book, A Universe Less Traveled, is out on Thursday of this week, September 10th. Yep. You can get it at Left Bank Books, our local independent bookstore. Of course, you can order it on one of those big businesses where 47,000 vehicles will drive around on your street and deliver stuff to your door with a giant carbon footprint. My personal preference, support the independents, places like KDHX and Left Bank Books. Eric, love you. Good work, good story, good vision, good characters. It was really a joy to read that, and it's really a great pleasure to be able to be your host in this edition of Earthworms on KDHX.
Well, thank you, Gene. It's really a pleasure for me, kind of a dream come true to be here and be a guest on your show.
Normally, you'd probably be here in the thick of the summer, and it would be hot and humid, and you'd be on a book tour, and now you get to stay in the cool of your adopted home.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Eric von Schrader, A Universe Less Traveled. We'll have some links to it from the Earthworms podcast page. Thanks very much to Earthworms engineers, Andy Coco, Andy Hazlett, John Valley, and tonight helping us out also Ronnie Wisdom. Want to let you know that Earthworms is brought to you by Forest Keeling Nursery, representing over 7 decades of research and commitment to grow superior plants that are also better for the environment. Forest Keeling provides native plants that survive and thrive in our region, retaining soil and nurturing wildlife with their fruit, nectar, and cover. Learn more about Forest Keeling Nursery at fknursery.com. And I'm never supposed to make a comment about one of the supporters of KDHX, but if I were going to get street trees for a place like HD St. Louis, I would certainly get native species, and that would be one of the places I would tap it.
You got it.
Eric von Schrader, we'll see you on Thursday night of this week, the 10th of September from 7 to 8 p.m. as Left Bank Books hosts you as an author, and I get to be your conversation partner. And I know that we will hear more about you and from you, including looking forward to the sequel and the movie version of A Universe Less Traveled.
The movie version is a gleam in my eye at this point, but you never know. Hope springs eternal.
And you write with cinematic sensibility. That is very smart. I'm Jean Ponzi. Thanks for listening to Earthworms podcasting from kdhx.org. Pick it up, podcast.kdhx.org. Thanks for checking out A Universe Less Traveled. Thanks for the green things you do. Good night.